It's always kind of interesting. People will jump lines to come to the priest line sometime for communion. And I'm always like, it's all Jesus. It's all been consecrated. Nothing, our Lord doesn't change depending on who touches him. I think for a long time we held the Eucharist up as kind of this object that we had to strive to be holy enough to attain. And so people didn't really receive baptism or Eucharist until their deathbeds. And the separation just kind of kept growing on lowered baptism, but then Eucharist was something that I can't receive that unless I'm completely out of any stain of sin. And Pope St. Pius X, though, there was a little girl, and I forget her name, but she was like 1-2 years old, and she had a great devotion to the Holy Eucharist. And the Church really only says if you want to receive Holy Communion, you have to be able to technically just know that it's different from a piece of ordinary bread. There's something different about it. And so this girl knew that it was Jesus, and she'd always wanted to receive her Holy Communion. She had some case that she died, but she wasn't able to receive that. But they had appealed to Rome to see if they could, if she could receive her first Holy Communion. And that was kind of like one of the impetus things for him, where he lowered the age then to the age of reason, as we call it, 7 or 8 years of age, second grade, but encouraged as well frequent reception of Holy Communion, that it's not just something that we take during the Easter season, but that we receive grace from our Lord in the Eucharist during that. So
how we receive comes from the USCCB, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. So they basically tell us how to receive communion, and I'll let Father Corey talk about how we receive communion.
Yeah, so I guess there's a difference in the Church. We have kind of rule, regulation, law, then we have norm. And so there's universal law that applies throughout the Church, and then different conferences of bishops have what becomes norm, either by practice or by a letter that says this is what we do. And so for a very long time in the Church, there's different liturgical sacramental theologians. They argue about it all the time. Was the reception more in the hand in the early Church? Was it more on the tongue? Was it receiving, feeding yourself? It's a culture liturgy war thing that's just kind of crazy. I think always the important thing to remember is what's our posture interiorly when we receive the Lord. And so am I prepared to receive him? Am I kneeling in my heart, if I will? If I'm really understanding that I'm receiving Jesus, then that's the most important thing. Versus the exterior disposition. Though what we do exteriorly always is reflection of interior sometimes. And so if I come up and I'm laissez-faire, then it's okay, I'm kind of being disrespectful. And so am I being reverent, etc. But the Church, the GERM, the General Instruction of the Roman Missal, had a change that went back 2011, I want to say, where they changed the translation of it. And so it used to imply when things get translated from Latin, that's the reason the Church uses Latin, is we say it's a dead language because it's not spoken. And so when it's not spoken, new words aren't added as frequently. And so it's very easy to understand this is what it means. So the Church always issues things in Latin, and then she breaks it up into individual languages. And sometimes when she translates things get changed a little bit. So when we were talking about the foot washing, it used to say viri selecti, select group of men, only men. And Pope Francis issued a letter that changed that, and so it opened it up, and he said it should be a representation of everybody in the community, religious, men, women, children, babies, etc. The germ seemed to imply with the second edition of the Roman Missal that if somebody knelt to receive communion, that they should be educated as to why they shouldn't do that, and it shouldn't happen. The third translation of it, the germ kind of changed that and reflects a little bit more some of the magisterial documents. So Redemptionis Sacramentum that Pope Benedict XVI published said that no one's ever to be refused the sacrament if they stand, if they kneel, but that they should, again, it's all about interior posture. And so what are we doing when we come before the Lord? And so the germ now states that the option belongs to the communicant. So you can receive standing, you can receive kneeling, you can receive on the tongue or on the hand. The Bishops' Conference then has a norm that they put into place. And so the USCCB and even local bishops can apply a universal law. And so in the United States of America, they said our norm is that we receive standing. And so You might go to some parishes, they might have a practice of using the communion rail, kneeling or something. But the norm across the U.S. is that we receive standing. And then especially in the Diocese of Owensboro, that's our norm from Bishop. But also just the reception of communion in the hand has become more of the norm, but that's always kind of the choice of the communicant. During COVID, there was a big spat about it, and a lot of bishops weren't allowing people to receive on the tongue versus on the hand, and hygienic things, etc. I mean, distributing on the tongue, you always got a licker. Sometimes somebody licks your finger or something, and I always joke sometimes, I'm like, my job is to get Jesus in your mouth so you don't drop him. And so if I have to go 2 knuckles deep, that's what you have to do. But it's about reverence for our Lord, and that we don't want him to fall. We don't want particles to be spilled and things. And so the church gives us those options. But really, it's the one who comes for communion. They can receive on the hand or on the tongue. But the norm in the U.S. is standing to receive communion. But it always goes back to that interior position of, how am I prepared to receive our Lord? Am I wanting to seek intimacy, closeness with him? And then am I preparing my heart to do that? And how do I do that in an appropriate manner? So there's norms, there's rules. You can ask your individual priest if you have questions about it. Everybody's different.
Yeah, I mean, the mechanics of receiving on the tongue is basically just stand still and open your mouth and stick your tongue out, because the biggest problem, as Father Corey said, is people stick their tongue out and then they'll move their head forward while you're going. And so you have this, this
like teeth, lip.
Yeah, coming together of you and their head, mouth. So, just stand there. We can see, and we'll do our job from there. So for the people that receive on the hand, to just treat that host like, I don't know, I mean, it's the most important thing in the world. Maybe it's an infant. Let's say you could put an infant in your child, and if you were to drop that infant, obviously they would, you would hurt that, maybe brain damage, you might kill the kid. And so you would treat that with the utmost respect and gentleness. And so we do get some people that come and they're not even paying attention, and they'll drop a host, or they're just, the reverence isn't there. They're not paying attention. So, act like you're holding a baby. And if you dropped it, like, that's not good. So that's the best way to explain that, just to kind of get people to understand that this isn't just a piece of bread. This isn't something to take not seriously, because a lot of times people do. So, and we, again, when we go to do First Communion training the Wednesday before, that's something that we always talk about, just to make sure we treat that with reverence. Now, do they continue to do that for the rest of their? And we don't know. I don't always see that for after. Yeah, we need to do some refreshers, but we teach them that. We start with that. Hopefully they remember it. But anyway, it is 7 and 8 year olds. So, but it happens across the board, adults all the way down. So
it's always kind of interesting. People will jump lines to come to the priest line sometime for communion, and I'm always like, it's all Jesus. It's all been consecrated. Nothing. Our Lord doesn't change depending on who touches him.
Yeah,
the chalice doesn't keep your hands from
Yeah, when people receive from the chalice, generally they don't kneel down either. So it's like, well, what's the difference? There shouldn't be really a difference there. But, something else, we can add this in the video or not, but something I've been thinking about lately, and we get a lot of this, and I listen to a lot of my podcasts, and I was listening to a podcast, I believe it was one of Joe Rogan's podcasts. He had a guy on there who was an FBI undercover agent, and he infiltrated different groups from the right and the left, far right, far left groups. And he says, at the end of the day, they all worship the same thing, which is death, which is the devil, right? So if you're far left, obviously you support abortion, you want to kill all the babies, whatever the case may be. He said when you were in the far right, white supremacists, they wanted to, of course, kill Jews and persons of color, all these different groups. And he says at the end of the day, they both just worship death, and they're both being fooled. And so I say that because, sometimes we can get too far right, and we think, well, we have to be overly conservative, and you've got to do it this way. And then you got people on the far left, and more than likely the devil's got both of you, right? Fooled. So that's why I try to always bring us back to the middle. And I think the church does a good job of trying to bring us back to the middle. Yes, we've got different groups and there's all kinds of stuff going on. But at the end of the day, we need to try to find some common middle ground. And I think that's where, it seems to me like that's where God lives. And so that's an important part, I think, of receiving communion, that you don't want to go too far to the right. And you don't want to go too, again, you don't want to just be up there like, whatever, this is just, you don't want to be up there this is the only way to do it. So I think if you find that middle ground, that's good. So, and it seems to me like that's kind of where we are. So.